research is important, and the Coalition, when we were in government, always recognised the importance of high-quality research. We want to make sure that researchers are working on the cutting edge, that their research is innovative, but it's also aimed at advancing our nation, putting Australia first, and aligns with our priorities and is working towards outcomes that support our economy and our communities and our society. And we know that there are lots and lots of brilliant minds in our country, and we as a coalition government wanted to work with those minds. We wanted to support those minds. We wanted to make sure that they had their chance to contribute to our wonderful country, to our community, to the economy, to actually make a contribution to what, quite often, if you look at some of the projects that Australians have been responsible for in the past, have led to changes to the global environment. We had a little bit to do with Wi-Fi, and these have made significant improvements and changes to people's lives all around the world. So we want to make sure that that research is funded, and we want to make sure that every single dollar that's spent on research is done so in a way that it is in the national interest. It's not something that goes against our interest as a country, that doesn't look like it's going to have any impact at all at securing and ensuring our future as we go forward. And in fact, under the Coalition's $2.2 billion investment in the university research commercialisation package, this was $2.2 billion was a key factor of our support. And there were key initiatives to reform Australia's research commercialisation landscape. And when we talk about research commercialisation, it's all well and good to come up with an idea in a laboratory or come up with a new product or a new advancement in technology. But unless you can actually take that out and reach the marketplace, unless that can then be put into something that's actually of use to people, well, it doesn't achieve very much. So you do want to see a commercialisation outcome coming from a lot of the research that you're doing. So we wanted to place our national priorities at the heart of that research. To think that that wouldn't remain a consistent priority is almost gobsmacking. But we wanted to make sure that funded research by the Australian government was placing our national priorities at its core. That we were also looking to work with these organisations and researchers to make sure that those commercialisation opportunities were something that were on their agenda, were within reach, that was well supported. We wanted to see university research funding reform that actually strengthened genuine collaboration between researchers and industry, so that researchers are actually looking for things and exploring new ideas and new ways of doing things that's actually working with industry, so that they're actually working in tandem together, they're supporting each other, that we're not putting sort of good money into something that's going nowhere or goes somewhere that no one in industry is looking for that outcome. So you want to make sure that there is genuine collaboration between the two. And you also want to make sure that you're investing in the people, because at the very heart of this, researchers, organisations that conduct the research, at the very, very core of this, it is an individual, it is a person, and we want to make sure that those people are skilled, we want to make sure that they're supported, and we want to make sure that they are achieving the best as they can. And we did put in place a number of mechanisms to drive these reforms, and there were 5 key strategic and targeted investments that we made. There was the 243 Trailblazer University program to boost research development and drive commercialisation outcomes. There was a $150 million capital injection to expand the CSIRO main sequence venture programs, which backs start-up companies to help create commercial opportunities. There was $296 million for 1,800 industry PhDs, over 800 in new fellowships, the creation of a new IP framework for universities to support greater university-industry collaboration and the uptake of research outputs. And of course, there was $1.6 billion over 10 years for Australia's Economic Accelerator, a new stage-gated competitive funding program aimed to help university projects bridge the so-called valley of death on the road to commercialisation. So, as I've said, it is all about making sure that industry and research are operating in tandem with each other, that we're not working in the opposite direction of the other, and that there is ample opportunity for those researchers, those organisations, those university-led research programs to actually commercialise what they develop, what technology they devise, to ensure that the commercialisation allows for further investment in further research. But so where are we today? How have things changed? Why has there been a change that we now see around the way the Australian Research Council will work and operate, and how research will be treated in this country? Well, like everything we see from those opposite, it is under a veil of secrecy. We know that they like to keep things as opaque as possible, and they also like to remove themselves from any being ever responsible or being ever had to be held accountable in any shape or form. And so what we see here is the Minister for Education is removing his oversight of the ARC board and the grants that they are able to hand out. Now, these are taxpayer funded. It's your money. It's your money. All Australian taxpayers' money is handed out for these grants, and it should be expected by taxpayers that the money that they give to the federal government, that then when it is doled out with some sort of oversight. But no, this government wants to make sure when it comes to having any sort of responsibility, they will obfuscate, they will remove themselves, they will remove any transparency, and they will remove themselves from the equation of ensuring that any funding that's given to grants that would be deemed to be unacceptable, not in the national interest, that the minister has no oversight, has no capability to actually stop the ARC board from putting forward these grants. The minister will have no powers to revoke the grants. Now, you might think there that the minister under the previous coalition government was just willy-nilly revoking funding from grants. In fact, it happened very, very rarely. It was very uncommon for grants to have their funding revoked. And in fact, since 2005, so nearly 19 years, only 32 grants were revoked. So we're not talking about the hundreds or thousands of grants that have been given out on research projects. We're talking about 32 were revoked. And I know some of my colleagues had mentioned some of them, and I may take the liberty of reiterating some of them. But in monetary terms, we're talking about 0.53%. So we're less than 1% of all grants given had their money revoked. Now, so this puts to bed any outrageous slur that may have been inferred that the coalition that we somehow interfered with who got and who didn't get support. We're talking in monetary terms less than 1%, in fact 0.53% of money that was revoked. And that, so what we want to make sure though is that by removing this ministerial discretion, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here, taxpayer funds on research and outsourcing these decisions to the board, we just, this government is really trying to remove its accountability for its decisions to this place, to the parliament, and then ultimately to all Australians under the democratic system of responsible government. So it's ultimately, this is bad policy, and we will be opposing it. So this is fundamentally the Albanese government removing itself, putting a board in charge of a very large slice of money. It outsources their responsibility, but it also puts in place a system where anything goes. So there'll be an opportunity for projects to get funding without any oversight, without any responsibility for the funding laying at this government or the minister's doorstep. So some of the projects, just you might be interested to know, and perhaps those listening or for anyone that's watching and playing along at home or here in the gallery, some of the projects that were deemed not to be in the national interest. Because remember, at the core of this, our research funding is for projects that are in the national interest, that align with our national interests, our national security, ensuring that our economy and our community and our societies continue to move forward and have more opportunities available to them. So some of the projects that were revoked were gender, liminality and globalisation, transgender and transnationalism in contemporary Polynesia. Not sure that has much to do with Australian society and our national interest. I did hear Senator Brockman refer to spectacles, dress and second-wave feminism in the Philippines. Another one, perverse corporealities, self-transformation and the sexual body in contemporary queer and gender theory. Classical love in modern times, transformation in the kiseong profession in colonial Korea. Beauty and ugliness as persuasive tools in changing China's gender norms. I'm pretty sure President Xi wouldn't be too into that one. I'm not quite sure President Xi and China would be in there with regards to looking at beauty and ugliness as persuasive tools in changing China's gender norms. I'm not quite sure China's that into changing gender norms, but far be it from me, but I'm pretty sure it's still not in Australia's national interest. I'm pretty sure those in the gallery aren't desperately searching for their wallet to chuck us down a fiver to add to that one. A history of Australian men's dress, 1870 to 1970. Original title, shirt-fronted, A History of Australian Men's Dress, 1870 to 1970. Look, you're not going to say on this one it may have been revoked. As long as we don't go back to those long collars and fat ties, I think there might actually be some value there. I don't know. Maybe some of the men will get a few tips, stick with a nice Tom Ford tuxedo or whatever it might be. But, you know, again, not really sure it's going to be pushing the national debate forward. Soviet cinema in Hollywood before the blacklist, 1917 to 1950. Now, I mean, seriously, I know communist Australia is not dead. It is not dead. We know that communist Australia still has its supporters, some of them who I think sit close in this chamber, or thankfully not that close. But I'm not quite sure these are programs that invest in the national interests, that advance our national economic, social, environmental and cultural interests. Certainly no tangible benefits. Again, I'll just come back to the fat ties and the bell-bottoms and the long collars. I think we can avoid those. I think that just goes without saying. But really, it's not really up to the taxpayer to decide these things. Yet here we are with the minister saying, don't ask me, I'm not going to have any oversight of the taxpayer funders that literally sit in my bailiwick. And if the board sits there and you know, who knows who's going to be appointed to this board? Goodness me, I mean, you know, what's the criteria there? We can ask those questions. Not sure we'd ever get to the bottom of those. We can't even get any information on NDIS funding, which is pretty important to 600,000 Australians. I can't see why they'd bother to give us any information about who they're going to appoint to these boards. Actually, that said, when I think about who they appointed to the boards, particularly around the National Reconstruction Fund and some of the other big issues that there's some big pots of money they've put aside, they've actually all been payments for their union mates. Quite a few of them, union mates, have been put straight on those boards. We have a very special friend of Senator Ayres who's managed to get on two since this government's come to power. Two boards he's got. National Reconstruction Fund, even though they had a great board, according to Minister Hughes, had a great board, ready to go, open for business. Oh, but oops, we just realised we didn't appoint one of our union mates and we can fit him on the board. A couple of $100,000 a year payment. Nice job if you can get it. So why would we trust who they're going to put on their board? We know it's just going to be their union mates that go on the board, make some crazy research decisions. How can we expand union membership across every single industry? Well, I think they know what they'll be trying to do with that one. But there'll be no responsibility on the minister because the minister, don't talk to me. I have no oversight. I'm washing my hands of all responsibility. Yet again, no accountability, no transparency, all those good government promises that Albanese made. My word is my bond. My word is my bond, said Prime Minister Albanese, and we know how effective that was. It was a complete load of rubbish. Every Australian can see he's completely full of rubbish, and this is just Minister Clare trying to remove himself, absolve himself from any accountability, responsibility, let them appoint more of their board mates to research council positions so they can then probably use it to do dirty deals with the Greens to let them fund some of these crazy research projects. I mean, I've got no doubt that what was one of the good ones there, Senator O'Sullivan, I can't find the list now I've gone through, but there was some crackers. The beauty and ugliness and persuasive tools in changing China's gender norms. Pretty sure the Greens would be right in on that one. Gender liminality and globalisation, transgender and transnationalisation in contemporary Polynesia.